1990s kicked the horror industry in the gonads with the movie Scream, and they said, yo, we're about to get meta, so many had followed suit. As creatively genius as meta films were, ironically they became very dumbed down and surface level as time went on. And then there was a mass amount of found footage films, documentary style films that, really catered to the POV perspective of a killer. But today we're going to be talking about one specific one that does a little bit of meta and found footage, a mockumentary if you will, and this one talks about one of the biggest serial killers who hid behind Freddy Krueger's gloves in the murky shadows by Crystal Lake, and he wants his comeuppance, he wants his revenge. That's right, we are talking about the rise of Leslie Vernon. Come hang out with your boy. What up, y'all? Welcome back to Phantom of the Indie Review. I am your host. If I pan the camera over a half an inch, I will get copyright strike because I'm watching Grimm. You don't want to see my TV. We are on the light's bright, bro. We are on the glorious journey of 4,000 subscribers by my 21st birthday. I'm old. By my 31st birthday in February. I'm an Aquarius. Let's do this. If you like talking nostalgia, horror, creepy shit, meta, and you just want to have a good time, you just want to avoid politics, stupid shit, people crying. Sometimes I get emotional. But if you just want to have fun, come hang out with me and give me a subby. 2025 has been quite actively insane for me. You guys are probably wondering, bro, you've barely been uploading, slacker. Well, let me tell you something. On the first day of this year, I got insanely sick. So I was pretty much bedridden for 9 days, and then after that, somehow, my tripod goes missing. I have a bunch of kids at the house. They took it, put it down, and buried it in the backyard like a fucking dog. And then I was like, dude, okay, bought a new tripod. CapCut goes down. I'm not a TikToker. I mean, I post on TikTok here and there, and I wasn't too impacted by it until they took away my CapCut, and I was like, dude, I'm just gonna fucking retire. But now we are back. So sorry for the rant. I just wanted to let all the ones that have been fucking with me know the truth. Where's my vape? The number one thing I want to talk about this movie that quite really grasped me, because I've known about this movie for a long time, probably about 10 years, and I've always been intrigued to watch it, but never had the chance till now. I finally, bit the bullet and I said, let's do it. Is that this film is set in a world where the killers depicted in famous franchises such as Friday the 13th, Halloween, and all them are portrayed as being once real. From Freddy Krueger to Michael Myers in Camp Crystal Lake, even Charles Lee Ray, the damn Lakeshore Strangler himself, even our boy Mike Myers. Where's that mask? You've seen it before. Why am I pointing it out? They're all real. I feel like that brings a very interesting narrative to the story when we find out that a journalist named Taylor Gentry and her two cameramen, Doug and Todd, as they document a man named Leslie Vernon who, during the time spans of Freddy Krueger and Mike, just kind of slipped under the radar. He was just as real and vicious and brutal to a lore, to a community's tragedy as they were, and now they had the bright idea to be like, yo, let's go hunt him down and do a documentary style about him. And Leslie wants to join the ranks of the prolific serial killers. He wants to be up and coming with them because, he's dedicated his life to this passion, and you can feel that energy ooze out of him. And Leslie also claims to be a boy from a local urban legend who one day supposedly became possessed, killed his family, and was like going on a fucking tear of his own, and then the townsfolk gets belligerently upset with him, pretty much hunt him down, but he survived the attack and years later wants to pay revenge to all that have wronged him. And this movie is subtle, genius, and hilarious as they pretty much follow him as he walks the documentarians through his plan of how he's going to be the next greatest serial killer of all time. And though this movie takes place in a small town in Maryland called Glen Hollow, which is a pretty dope name if you ask me, the movie was filmed in Oregon. And a lot of times in meta films, there's a lot of over-explanation, there's a lot of dumbing down the narrative to the audience because, some people can't quite keep up with scripts. But I feel like this one, even though there are some moments where they kind of heavily lean into the narrative and soliloquies, so to speak, it merits a lot of interesting points, and a lot of things that they poke fun of are very genuine and true. For example, there's this one part where they go back to his old childhood home where the lore takes place, and he's kind of like using it as a metaphor. He's like, dude, like this is the sacred ground where people come to get scared by me. And it's just like, you can tell that every little detail in his life is very focused and pinpointed. Like, he is trying to be the next greatest serial killer, obviously because he's clinically insane, but also because it's very poetic and deep into his soul. Let's talk about the look of Leslie Vernon himself. There are so many iconic imagery in horror. I know I use the word iconic a lot, but when we're talking about the 80s and 90s, it's got to be said. It goes hand in hand. It like goes with like Mountain Dew and deliciousness. Not a sponsor, but the look he has is just so unique. He uses like a crop scythe. I don't know what the word for it is. The thing that, like, you know, in Stardew Valley when you're swinging that shit to like get your crops and shit. What kind of looks like to me like a statue mixed with like a baby doll mask that's very featureless and bulky and gray, and then he wears like overalls like Huckleberry Finn style with this like with a capri cut low top like rolled up so he doesn't get like mud on him and shit. And it's very like 1950s reminiscent to me, and I think it's dope, and I really like the way they utilize it. There's a scene where they show him getting ready where he's placing the black makeup around his eyes, and it's very eerie and cool. And yeah, I feel like his appearance doesn't get enough credit. I feel like the dude looks like a complete genuine badass. I love the design. There's this one meme that is so funny and it goes hand in hand with the movie because it's so dark and twisted but hilarious. It's like him standing there, he's like, yo, does this look atmospheric or whatever? Does this look creepy as shit? And that's just Leslie in a nutshell. And all around his demeanor and aesthetic is very frightful and one of a kind. Leslie plans to orchestrate a killing spree at his alleged family home, a rundown farm in the woods. At the farm, he plans to slaughter a number of teenagers before being confronted by his chosen virgin survivor girl, and, you know, he even takes the crew to like scout out the people. He's like, you see them, they're the jocks, they're cool, they're gonna want to party together. Those stoners over there, they're gonna be slow, they're just gonna be carnage candy. I'm gonna kill them off too, just for fun. And her, someone like her, is the apple of my eye. A lot of people think serial killers just, you know, kind of pop out of nowhere and wait around. He's like, no, this takes a lot of obsession and planning. And that brings me to the point of Nathan Basil. Is that how you pronounce his name? This movie might not have worked without him, dude. He is so funny, riveting, and eerie. Like, there's a beautiful dichotomy of how quirky and like childlike he is until he flips that switch of being evil and soulless. You're like, dude, you're rooting for him, and that's along the lines of villains such as like Chucky or Freddy Krueger. You know, Michael and Jason, they don't talk too much, but Leslie, the character Leslie, goes hand in hand with that comedic, that sardonic comedic insanity. Angela Goethals, who plays, what the fuck's the bitch's name? Who plays Taylor, is another intricate piece too, because as inquisitive she is, she kind of has that mentality where she's like, we're doing this documentary, I deserve to know everything about the sadistic serial killer. Like, you know, it's like that whole movement where some people, they just feel like almost selfish in a way because they're trying to do the whole humanitarian justifiable thing, but it's kind of teetering back and forth to a selfish delusion and fame. You know, they want to act like they're doing the best thing in the right groundbreaking documentary style, but deep down it's a selfish act. But without that character, they really finally balance each other. Like, there's almost a love interest between them, like in the way she hesitates when she's around him and the way he kind of like looks at her without speaking. You can feel like this chemistry brewing, like, damn, they might be kind of vibing with each other. And this movie is built wonderfully. It pretty much narrates behind the scenes, and I feel like it's a genius plot, the entirety of what it takes for a serial killer to make a movie like theme unfold for news to pretty much, you know, anchor it out as a news story. Like, there's even one part where he's like at the house showing them exactly who he's gonna kill first, how he's gonna cut the power line, how he's not gonna allow them to escape, and she's like, that's kind of unfair. And he's like, how's that unfair? I'm at a disadvantage. He's like, I have like 9 people against just me. I gotta prep. He's like, I gotta take some of these like hammers and loosen the tops. I gotta lock these windows. He's like, if they escape, my whole plan's over with. And you're like, you think about it, you're like, that's actually kind of clever. And the lady that he is chasing after is a 17-year-old local girl named Kelly Curtis, and he pretty much is creating his own narrative. He made a bunk newspaper article being like, one of the townsfolk from back in the day that killed Leslie Vernon was blah 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 Curtis, and he was trying to convince her that it is his great uncle or something. And Taylor's like, is he? And she's like, I don't fucking know. He's like, I just made this guy up to scare her. And it's just so funny. It's funny too because Leslie has like a strict training regimen, and he mentions things like learning theater techniques to create the proper atmosphere. Again, he like rigs the farm in his favor. He says like he practices his cardio. He's like, dude, you know how hard it is to chase after someone and act like you're not tired? Like, It's just well executed, and again, without the actor who plays Leslie, I feel like you couldn't pull it off. We even get introduced to another character who's like an inspiration to Leslie, a serial killer from in the day, where we meet this character because they dig him up from under the ground. It's like, yeah, he practices his breathing down there, and he's like, they find out he's been down there like days longer than he meant to be, and it's just like this old creepy guy. And this guy sheds a lot of light on the lore of serial killers too, because Leslie has this weird selfish need to be the next big thing, and his counterpart, if you will, is pretty much takes the crew back to his house, has a dinner. He's like a smoking hot wife, and he's like telling all these stories. He's like, back in the 70s, people used to be dedicated to the craft. There used to be fine, amazing killers like Freddy Krueger, Jason. They're the cream of the crop. But then there's these idiots out there that kind of give us all a bad reputation. And you can see that between Leslie and this other dude, that these killers, they're not looking at it like it's like, hey, we're psychotic and sadistic and we just kill people for fun. They look at it like an art form, and that's kind of surreal and creepy. And Eugene, the guy that Leslie undigs, he like vaguely elaborates the motives of killers like himself, that they're pretty much sacrifices being evil so they can bring good out into the world. And then, you know, as Leslie's like crafting the story in his head, he's like, I gotta find a way to make this final girl really scared. I don't want to just kill off one of her friends, it's too soon. And Eugene's wife is like, well, she spends a lot of time at the library, why don't you just kill that librarian that she always sees? And he's like, oh my god, you're amazing. Like, they just show all these little in and out workings of like behind the scenes of a horror movie. Like, there's this one scene also where he's like, she's gonna come out of the restaurant, and he has Taylor and the crew help him. He's like, as I sneak up behind her and she's gonna take out the garbage, you're gonna pull the string and it's gonna lock the door. And they do it, and she like sees him and runs off scared, and they're like, dude, that was awesome. And there's this weird like moral conundrum, because you're like, they know he's doing all this creepy, eerie stuff, and they're filming it, but what happens if he actually pulls the trigger? One major thing I love talking about early 2000s movies for me is obviously the vibe of it. I feel like you can't capture that feeling in movies anymore. Try as you may, try as you might. Sometimes people will be like, oh, this movie's set in the 90s or the 2000s, and like the music matches and like the clothing, but not really the aesthetic of the filming and cinema. And this movie, from the farmhouse to the teens that get chased along by Leslie, and even, you know, the entire aura, the woods, the houses, the town, the small town, sleepy town itself. It just has a early 2000s vibe. Like, the second you put the movie on, it just like, it's a time capsule unlocked, and it makes you feel good and special and eerie, because those movies have an eerie nostalgia for me. But when they get to the library, they decide to actually, you know, follow through. You know, she reads the article, she brings it up, and this is where we get a great cameo from the late great Zelda Rubinstein as Mrs. Collinwood, the librarian, where she kind of deep dives into the lore of Leslie Vernon. She's like, he was a young demented boy who killed his family. A very creepy and fun incident story involving, you know, the townsfolk and apple orchard, and him being thrown into a river to die where the turtles fed off his corpse. And as she pretty much delivers this monologue, unaware that Leslie's lurking in the shadow of the library, Leslie pops up and tries to kill her, and then we're hit with an introduction of a plot twist, I guess, of a character named Doc Halloran, who's pretty much like a Dr. Loomis character, and it's played by the icon Robert Englund himself, Freddy Krueger, the Springwood slasher. And you're like, that's kind of dope. And he's like, dude, obviously there's going to be a counterpart that was my therapist when I was a kid. So clearly, again, he's drawing inspirations from all these other killers, and they're not movies in this universe, they're real, so it kind of makes it more interesting. And he's like, he's going to come and try to stop me, no big deal. And this movie builds until they get to the final climactic scene of the farmhouse, where they do, you know, in movies when they do the bank heist scene, where they're like, this is exactly how the perfect heist is going to go, and then they end up showing the bitter truth of it all. That's kind of what happens, but he's like, this is exactly how I'm going to kill everyone at this farmhouse. But as he goes in and slaughters the first two victims, Taylor and the gang has this moral conundrum. As he escorts them outside, he's like, this is my life's work and you're fucking with it, so you guys gotta go. He spares them, and they're like, of course, Taylor filming, she's like, we gotta stop this, we gotta put a stop to this. And that's another thing that rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, you might have thought he was delusional, you might have thought like he was telling a tall tale, but you could see how insane he was, and you didn't stop it until he killed someone, and now you feel uncomfortable. It's a weird situation to be in. I don't blame her, but they decide to band together and stop it, and this is where the movie kind of full start kicks. And I want to get into one minor spoiler alert, that I thought was quite genius, that all along Taylor was the virgin sacrifice he was looking for. And I feel like that is brilliant. It's like, holy shit, dude, Like, you think he's taking them along to just, you know, get notoriety and fame and kind of kickstart his career. He's like, if I do all this and they make a movie, it's gonna nip it in the bud, and it's gonna like kickstart me into a new like element. But no, he knew all along that Taylor was innocent and a virgin and sacrificial to his game, and he was luring her in all along. And you're like, that is genius. And it just builds up with a little cat and mouse game where she finally tries to destroy him, and it ends with a nice clever line where Doc Holland's character, she's scared, and he says, after all, he is just a man. And then as we see him dying in the flames, the movie ends, and to this day there has never been a spin-off, making it that maybe his delusions of being a supernatural entity like Michael Myers were and Jason were kind of like I don't know if it's on purpose or if I'm reading too much into it, but it like inadvertently reels in that supernatural element of Jason, Chucky, Michael Myers. It's like maybe these guys weren't as supernatural as people made them out to be, and maybe people create a story and a narrative through fear and trauma, which brings up another point of like an egregore kind of, which doesn't fully pertain to the situation. I kind of want to do a video on the word egregore itself, but which is like a non-physical entity or thought form that arises from the collective thoughts and emotion of a distinct group of individuals. For example, you hear Leslie Vernon's farm down the road is haunted because he killed a bunch of people. People are gonna go there and make it scarier than it seems. You go to a cemetery with all these corpses in it, you're gonna feel a weird energy, and it's almost like a self-created hysteria that manifests into chaos. And that's a very interesting fact. So if you want to see an in-depth video on that category itself, let's get this to 12 likes. But yeah, all in all, this movie was pretty fucking awesome. It was hilarious. It was deep. It was beautifully written. You could feel the passion from all the characters around involving. And I feel like it was just kind of like a lightning in a bottle type scenario for a film. Oftentimes we see all these, modern pop culture figures are becoming icons, such as, Maxine Minx from the X trilogy, Art the Clown. There's been a few standalones here and there, but could Leslie Vernon have been a horror icon himself if they continued to move on with the franchise? The moral of this is I feel like I've been pretty bad at wrap-ups and videos, and I want to kind of practice doing this. The points I'm taking away from this movie is how genuinely interesting it is to get behind the mind of a killer and seeing someone document that, the unravelings and the chemistry of curiosity killed the cat, so to speak, because these innocent people are like curious with the morbid nature of Leslie, and until it unravels, they kind of question if he's going to do it until he does, and then they have to flip the script. A lot of times, a lot of people watch true crime and all this horrific stuff, but what would you do if you were in that situation? The chemistry between Taylor and Leslie is phenomenal, and the overall build of this character, setting him in a situation where all these great horror icons were a part of this world, and he is trying to make his name in it. It's very scary too, because a lot of people you see, they become killers for the fame and glory. So a lot of these real world aspects tied together into a funny, gut-wrenching, and horrific story that I just found to be quite brilliant all around. This movie does have a noble 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that means after all these years, it's been about almost 20 years, people really do dig it. And I feel like the Screams of the 90s, like the Sinisters of the 2012, it was kind of really an original movie that, yes, it was meta, it was mockumentary, kind of leaned into other tropes, but it really had a heart and soul of its own. And I just wanted to talk about this movie, and I thought it was fun. So comment down below, let me know, have you seen this movie? If you have, what did you think about it? I would really love to know. And again, sorry guys for taking so long to upload a video. It's been a while, 2025. It's been very good. I've had a lot of really good moments lately, but kind of some weird shit going on too. But yeah, next video after this is gonna be longer, bigger, better, stronger. I just had to get back into the swing of things after getting my tripod and CapCut back. I wanted to get back to the community that I love so much. I miss you guys. There are people commenting daily that reach out to me. You guys are my homies. If you're new to the channel, again, what up? What it do? We the Drip Fed Dread. I also have a secondary channel where I'm going to be making content that's a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about my favorite TV show, Grimm of all time. I'm going to be doing like food reviews, cooking, and all that weird stuff. So I'm not trying to like make money off of it. I just want to have a separate channel because this one's dedicated to horror. So if you want to follow that, it's called Unk Dread. Thank you so much. But alright guys, thank you so much for watching. What's my outro? It's been a minute. Please subscribe, give me a thumber, hit that ding-ling button harassing you, telling you, hey, it's me, I'm here, and I'm gonna say it one time for the one time and two time for the O's. Give me a hell yeah for horror. was fun.
How'd you do that?
Tricks of the trade, man. Tricks of the trade. Plenty more where that came from.
So yeah, the episode starts off with a young Billy